Billionaire signed the wrong line. The black waitress pointed to life. "Sir, you signed the wrong line." The room froze. It was a quiet morning inside the Golden Finch, a luxury restaurant where rich people ordered silence with their breakfast. The air smelled of money and fear. At table 9 sat Charles Wentworth, a billionaire known for his ego and his signature, the kind that made or broke lives with one stroke of a pen. Across from him, a group of investors watched as his pen moved confidently across a stack of documents. Then came that voice. Soft, careful but firm. Everyone turned. It was Naomi, a young black waitress standing beside the table, holding a silver tray against her chest. Her uniform was old, her shoes worn, but her eyes carried courage. Charles looked up, annoyed. "Excuse me?" Naomi swallowed hard but didn't back down. "You signed the wrong line, sir. That's not the approval form. It's the—" He cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Young lady, I've been signing papers before you were born. I think I know where to put my name." The men at the table chuckled. Naomi's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. "With respect, sir, that line means you just transferred ownership, not approved it." Silence fell. The investors leaned in. One of them took the papers, reading quickly. Then his face turned pale. "She's right," he whispered. "He just signed away $20 million. The color drained from Charles's face. "What?" Naomi stepped back slightly, her voice calm. "Page 4, bottom left corner." You missed the small print. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the room erupted. Calls for lawyers, panic, shouting. Charles stood, red with fury. "Who do you think you are, girl?" Naomi didn't flinch. Just someone who reads what others ignore. Their eyes locked. Power and pride colliding with truth. "Get her out of here." The words came out like thunder. Naomi stood frozen as Charles Wentworth slammed his gold pen onto the table. His investors were whispering, lawyers on their phones, assistants scrambling. She had only tried to help, but now, the world's most powerful man was staring at her like she was the problem. "Sir," she started softly, "I wasn't trying to—" "Save it," he barked. "Do you know what you just did? You embarrassed me, in front of my own board." Naomi's heart pounded. "I just didn't want you to lose." "Lose?" he shouted. "You think I care about money? I care about control. And you just made me look weak." The room went silent. Even the chef peeked out from the kitchen. Naomi swallowed hard. "Would you rather I let you lose everything?" Charles glared. "You already cost me my pride. Get out." "You're fired." Her eyes burned, but she stood tall. "Yes, sir." She placed the tray down, straightened her uniform, and turned toward the door. An hour later, Charles sat alone in his office upstairs. Papers covered his desk, but his mind wasn't on numbers. It was on her. That voice, steady, calm, unshaken. That courage, to correct a man like him, knowing she'd lose her job for it. He opened the folder again, staring at the document. She had been right. If she hadn't spoken up, he would have lost $20 million. Maybe more. "Who is she?" he muttered. His assistant hesitated. "Naomi Carter, sir. Waitress. Been here 8 months. Charles frowned. "Get her file." Minutes later, the assistant returned with a thin folder. Inside was her employment form. Handwritten, neat. But one detail made him pause. Previous occupation. Accounting intern. Wentworth Enterprises. 2016-2017. Charles froze. She had worked for him before, and next to her emergency contact was a name he hadn't seen in years. Linda Carter. His chest tightened. That was his late business partner's wife. Naomi wasn't just a waitress. She was his partner's daughter. "Find her," Charles said quietly. His assistant blinked. "Sir, Naomi Carter. Bring her back. Now." He didn't raise his voice, but his tone carried something heavier than anger. Guilt. Later that evening, Naomi sat alone at a small diner across the street from the restaurant, her apron folded beside her. The rain outside streaked across the glass, and she stirred her coffee without drinking it. She didn't regret speaking up, but she couldn't stop thinking about how quickly truth had cost her everything. The bell above the door rang. She looked up, and there he was. Charles Wentworth, wearing a long coat, eyes dark and unreadable. The entire diner went silent. Even the cook froze. Naomi stood startled. "What are you doing here?" He walked over slowly. "You worked for me before," she frowned. "That was a long time ago," he nodded. "And your father was Linda Carter's husband. My partner." Naomi's eyes widened. Her voice cracked. "You remember my dad?" Charles nodded quietly. "He was the smartest man I ever met. We started Wentworth Enterprises together, side by side. And when he died, everything fell apart." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "He didn't die rich, Mr. Wentworth. He died believing he'd been erased. My mother, she begged your company for the benefits he was promised. No one even called her back." Charles froze. "That's not true." Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out an old letter. Crumpled, faded, but real. "It's his resignation notice," she said quietly. "Filed 3 days before he passed. He wrote that he couldn't keep working under pressure, that his ideas were being taken without credit." Charles's face drained of color. He remembered those projects, the patents, the designs. He had told himself he built them alone, but he hadn't. Naomi's voice trembled but didn't break. "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to earn a living. I took the waitress job because I didn't want your name to scare people away." Charles swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "Naomi, your father saved my company." She looked him straight in the eyes. "And I just saved it again." The rain outside softened to a whisper. Inside the diner, silence wrapped around them like fog. Charles Wentworth, the man who ruled skyscrapers, sat across from a waitress who could barely afford rent. Yet he was the one trembling. "Naomi," he began softly, "I didn't know. If I had known, I would have—" She cut him off. "You would have what?" "Paid us off. Given my father a plaque." Her words hit like glass breaking. Charles looked down, guilt weighing on every breath. "I can fix this," he said finally. "I'll write you a check, a large one. Enough to cover your mother's hospital bills, your tuition, everything you need." Naomi shook her head. "You think money fixes everything, don't you?" He blinked, speechless. "My father didn't want your money," she said. "He wanted his name remembered. He wanted the world to know he mattered." Charles leaned back, staring at her, this young woman with her father's fire in her eyes. "Then what do you want from me, Naomi?" he asked quietly. Her answer came without hesitation. "Change." He frowned. "Change? You built your empire on men like my father, people who worked twice as hard for half the credit. You can't give me back what he lost, but you can make sure no one else ever gets erased again." Charles stared at her, the weight of her words settling deep in his chest. He had bought silence his whole life. Now someone was asking him to buy truth. Naomi stood to leave. "You don't owe me a check, Mr. Wentworth. You owe this world a conscience." She started walking toward the door, but stopped, glancing back once more. "My father believed in you. I hope someday you'll make him proud." And then she was gone. Charles sat there long after she left, staring at his reflection in the diner window, and for the first time in years, he didn't see power. He saw a man who had lost his soul trying to own everything else. The next morning, Charles Wentworth stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse office. The skyline stretched behind him, tall and untouchable, just like he used to be. But now all he could see was her face. Naomi's words replayed in his head like a song he couldn't escape. "You don't owe me a check. Mr. Wentworth, you owe this world a conscience." He took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Call an emergency board meeting. Today." 2 hours later, the boardroom filled with his top executives. Suits, watches, polished smiles. The same men who had laughed when Naomi corrected him at the restaurant. "Gentlemen," Charles began, "we're changing the way this company operates." Laughter rippled through the room. "Sir, you're joking, right?" one man said. "After what happened yesterday, the press already smells weakness." Charles leaned forward, his tone sharp. Weakness isn't admitting we've been wrong. It's pretending we haven't. He pulled out an old file and placed it on the table. This company was built on the work of people who never got credit, including a man named David Carter. The room went silent. He was my partner, my friend, and we erased his name from our history. Another executive scoffed. You can't rewrite history for sentiment, Charles. Charles' voice hardened. I'm not rewriting it. I'm correcting it. He stood, eyes blazing with conviction. From now on, our innovation wing will be renamed the Carter Initiative, to honor the man who built the foundation we still profit from. And we'll start a scholarship fund in his name, for every black student studying business and engineering who deserves a chance. The men exchanged uneasy glances. That's millions of dollars, sir. Charles smiled faintly. Then maybe it's finally money well spent. As the meeting ended, he looked out at the city, not as a king guarding his throne, but as a man trying to make peace with his past. For the first time in decades, he wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing redemption. You've lost your mind, Charles. The voices in the boardroom rose like thunder. A group of gray-suited men, powerful, rich, ruthless, crowded around the table. One slammed his fist down. You can't just give away millions to charity and rename departments like this. Investors will panic. Charles stayed calm, his eyes steady. Then let them. Maybe they should invest in something real for once, another man sneered. We built this company on strength, not sympathy. Charles turned sharply. No, you built it on silence. And silence made us blind. The room fell quiet for a moment. Then his CFO spoke. Older, colder. You're destroying the brand, Charles. This isn't redemption. It's suicide. Charles looked at them, his voice quiet but firm. Maybe it's time the world saw what we really are. Maybe that's the only way to fix it. He gathered his papers and walked toward the door. The Carter Initiative stays. That's final. As he left, he could hear the whispers behind him. He's lost it. That girl turned him soft. We'll vote him out before the quarter's over. That night, Charles sat alone in his office, the city glowing outside his window. He knew what was coming. Press leaks, shareholder calls, betrayal, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, there's someone here to see you. He looked up and froze. Naomi stood at the door, her uniform gone, wearing a simple blouse and jeans. You kept your promise, she said softly. My father's name. It's finally where it belongs. Charles smiled faintly. Your father earned it. I just signed the right line this time. Naomi stepped closer. They'll come for you, you know, he nodded. Let them. Maybe it's time someone else learned to read the fine print. The next morning, the headlines hit like lightning. Wentworth Board votes to remove CEO. Stock plummets after Carter Initiative. Announcement. Billionaire Charles Wentworth ousted from his own company. Charles sat in his car. Engine off, the papers spread across the seat beside him. The same men who once called him visionary were now calling him unstable. He didn't call his lawyers. He didn't fight. He just stared out the window at the sunrise. For the first time in years, it looked beautiful. Later that day, Naomi met him outside the community center where her mother volunteered. He looked different. No suit, no driver, no entourage. Just an old man holding his own briefcase. So it's true, she said gently. They took it all, he nodded. They can take the buildings, the cars, the company, but they can't take what your father taught me. Naomi tilted her head. And what's that? He smiled faintly. That the right signature isn't written with ink. It's written with actions. She chuckled softly, eyes warm. You sound like him now. Charles looked around the small center. Kids laughing, volunteers sorting supplies, people helping people. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rich, but it was alive. You said I owed the world a conscience, he said. Maybe this is where I find it. Naomi nodded. Then let's build something that matters. Over the next few weeks, they started a new foundation together. Not for profit, but for purpose. It was small, but it grew fast. The sign out front read, "The Carter Wentworth Foundation, Lighting Paths for the Unseen." And for the first time, Charles didn't feel powerful. He felt human. A year later, the old building that once housed Wentworth Enterprises stood silent. But across the street, a new banner fluttered under the sunlight. The Carter Wentworth Foundation. Building hope, not fortune. Inside, walls that once echoed with business meetings now rang with laughter. Children from struggling neighborhoods learned coding and design. Single mothers were being trained in finance and accounting. And on every wall hung the same quote, printed in bold gold letters. "You don't owe the world a check. You owe it a conscience." Naomi walked down the hallway, her heart full. At the end stood Charles, now older, gentler, surrounded by volunteers. He was teaching a group of young boys how to read a contract. Every line, every detail. "Always read before you sign," he told them with a smile. "Because sometimes the smallest line can change your life." When he looked up and saw Naomi, he grinned. "They're sharper than I was," she laughed softly. "That's because they had a better teacher." Later that evening, they stood outside as the sun dipped below the skyline. Charles looked at the building, the people, the light spilling out the windows. "Your father would have been proud," he said quietly. Naomi smiled, tears glimmering. "So would yours," he nodded. "Maybe we both signed the wrong lines once." She glanced at him. "And maybe life just gave us a chance to write new ones." They stood together in silence, watching kids run past, their laughter echoing against the city walls, a city that had once turned its back on truth, now shining with it. Moral of the story: the richest signature isn't written in money, it's written in mercy. You don't need to be powerful to change the world. You just need to read between the lines of life.